What is it like to have the world listen when you speak?
Well, it's kind of you to suggest that's the case. But all I can tell you is that I've been saying what I've been saying this afternoon and yesterday. I've been saying it for 40 years. I said it initially concerned because I saw animal species which I thought were marvelous. I saw them beginning to disappear, and I thought that was tragic. I was saying it at the turn of the millennium when I realized that that was just indicator, that was just litmus paper, the disappearing of a species here and a species there, that in fact the problem we are facing is profound and worldwide. And I remember making a television program in the year 2000 in which I said we had to do something. And nothing much happened. And I don't understand how it is that things have changed. I haven't changed what I've been saying. But suddenly, within the last 5 years, there has been a change in worldwide opinion around the world. And now suddenly, all the world recognizes that we are facing a climax and that we are, if we don't do something right now, we are heading for disaster. How that change came place, I don't know. There are 10,000 wonderful people around the world who are saying the same thing. But I do believe now that there is the light on the horizon. I do believe now that the age of indifference is over. I do believe now that people around the world, in every continent and of every race, are recognizing that we are all in this together. And from that I take some comfort.
Before we move on to how we can all do our very best to save the planet, I'd like to rewind the clock back a little bit to find out how in your 90 years you have done an enormous amount to save the world. And so when did your first love of nature come into your world? Because you were brought up almost at a university that we know now.
Yes, but you know, there were only a third number of people alive today when I was a boy. We're 3 times as many people here in this country and everywhere else in the world than there was when I was a boy. And I could get on a bicycle. I was brought up in Leicester, in the middle of England, and I regularly went on the bicycle and I sat about in the countryside. And I didn't know where I could find the nest of a long-tailed tit. I didn't know the pond where you could look in and you could see a great crested newt. And that I thought was magical. But I also thought it was magical that I could go into the ironstone quarries in Leicestershire and I could take a hammer and I could hit a rock and it would fall in two, and there I would see a shell in all its perfection, all its detail, and I would know that no human eye had set upon that before mine, and that the creature that I saw there was 150 million years old. And that was a moment of magic, as far as I'm concerned, and I've never lost that. I still think it's miraculous to see these evidences of life on our planet. And since I'm here in Scotland, I might as well say and thank Scotland, because the great pioneers of geology, you know, were Scots. Hugh Miller was one, for example. And this country was in the forefront of bringing the world's attention to the history of life and to its antiquity and its wonder.
But this is the thing, because we have this innate love for nature and animals as viewers. And so did you initially get the feedback that this was a really popular area of programming that you really wanted to continue? And thinking back to those early stages where you cracked open those fossils, you knew you were onto a winner because people were feeling what you were.
Well, that's true to an extent, but I'll let you into a secret. There was no other television. The BBC had a monopoly. Poor souls. Mind you, television was so new that it was in 1952, 53, you couldn't see it. You couldn't see it up here. It was London, and then eventually moved to Birmingham, or soon moved to Birmingham. But it was a small thing. And it was it was all live. It all came from Alexandra Palace, and it only lasted about 3 hours in the evening. And if you had a television set, you were so beguiled by the excitement. What you were seeing there was a couple of people who were sitting in Alexandra Palace just down the road. And so you actually, television started at 7:30 in the evening, and you got ready, and you actually sat there and waiting for it. So, okay, BBC, show us something. And then you sat through to the end. Yeah. And I can tell you, not only did you do that, but if something happened that you didn't care for, you thought it was your right to ring up the BBC in Alexandra Palace. And so there were very nice women men who looked after the telephones, and they would say, BBC television, and a viewer would say, I think this program is terrible. I mean, how long does it go on for? And the television girls would say, well, it's not very long. I've looked at the radio times. You've got about another 10 minutes to go. I know we're overrunning and so on, but if you hang on, there's something quite good at 8:15. And you actually sat through the whole evening because you had paid your license money, they were your programs, you had paid for them, so it was a waste not to watch them.
But for you, Sir David, I mean, technology and all of the cameras and everything, even today that are used, obviously, in the natural history world to take us down to the most deepest parts of the ocean. I mean, you've always been at the forefront and used the most up-to-date technology that's available. And really, if the key to television is to get the message out across the world and to those people who are watching it, then there's no finer example than you and the programs that you've made. And what has it been like for you through the years to have been able to work with such technology that's taking people to places they could never have dreamt of?
It's a fantastic privilege. I mean, this generation, television viewers, know more about the natural world that sits in their corner of their homes than in the whole of history. I mean, suddenly you've got insights. You go to the bottom of the deepest abyss in the sea, which people have never been before. No human being actually has been as deep as that. Certainly not. I mean, we send down unmanned cameras. What a fantastic privilege. So every year, pretty well, there has been a new advance. You could film in the dark. First you could film in twilight, then actually in pitch black you could get pictures. But that was an amazing. Every year you can slow things down, you can speed them up, you can see an image of this miraculous world in which we live, unparalleled before in any generation in the whole of human history. It is extraordinary. The latest thing are these drones. Drones, I mean, we've been playing with drones for a few years, but now a unit going on doing the sort of things I do, take a drone and a drone operator for granted, and you just send the thing up, and you suddenly get a shot of wildebeest being going into an ambush by lions, for example, which you could never see before. Nobody's ever seen before, from a drone. And the animals take no notice of them at all, because they're very quiet now. It wasn't to start with, but now they're absolute. You wouldn't know. Animals don't pay any attention at all, and suddenly, the people of the television viewers, have seen the world in a comprehensible way, and from an angle that nobody in history has ever done before.
Yeah.
It's a fantastic privilege. Now we can suddenly see what a wonder it is that we are so lucky as to inherit.
And this has to be at the heart of what we're saying about why now there is this, this push for climate, to do everybody's very best to reduce climate change, to stop the planet from warming up in the way that it is doing. But also the key is the way that you tell the story. And how has that changed over the years? And how, because obviously you've gone through periods where, as you were saying, you were filming animals on tables, then you started to bring in more of a dramatic story and maybe a bit of anthropomorphizing. I mean, how has it changed for you throughout your time?
I would like to think we've got better at it, because the variety of the quality of the shots that the cameramen now get, and the budgets have been much bigger than they were when I started. And so now we are producing natural history films, not just me, but people in this country. This country has been the leader in making natural history broadcasting. But there are people all over the world now. They all say, me, I want to do this, and quite right too. So they should. But we are now seeing a world in a way that no generation has ever been able to witness before. We all have we are familiar with the Amazon jungle. We know the wonder of a coral reef. We can see any animal that you wish. We can now film for you, if it still exists.
Yeah. Do you feel that your role has changed into becoming a campaigner now?
Oh, yes, certainly. It certainly has. BBC was, in the early days, when it was a monopoly, had an obligation not to campaign.
Yeah.
And if you had to put in both opinions if something was controversial. It didn't always do so. One of the times which I remember very clearly, because I was in producing at the time, was the first time the BBC took a stand and said, we are not going to, on a question, a controversial question, we're not going to say it's, on the one hand it's this, and on the other hand it's that. We're going to tell the truth as we see it. And the issue was smoking. Did smoking cause cancer? And the BBC, to its credit, in the higher flanks, echelon, were absolutely convinced that the scientific evidence was incontrovertible. And I don't mind admitting that there were very powerful forces in the cigarette industry that did their very, very best to stop us doing so. And all credit to the governors of the BBC for standing out, saying what they saw the truth. And you've seen the consequences. Well, that broke on this one hand and on the other hand, obligation. Yeah. And when the truth seemed absolutely incontrovertible, the BBC felt it had to say so. And it's been that way very much in the conservation issue. Yeah. But now, and now everybody, it's nobody arguing about it anymore. The truth is so incontrovertible that the BBC is able to say so.
Yeah. Do you remember that time when, because I'm sure for the longest time, as I have done in my career too, you're setting up pieces to camera, you're getting ready to film somewhere, and then you go and remove some rubbish and get it out of the way and make it look beautiful and pretty in the way that people would expect. When did that start to change for you? And when did that decision come to start featuring it as opposed to framing it out of shot?
Well, it depends what you're trying to do. There is such a science as zoology. There is such a science as botany. And it is a worthwhile thing to do to try and explain the foundations of those sciences and the truths of those sciences and the truth of ecology. And not necessarily feel that you've got to say all the time, but it's in danger and so on. That's a perfectly responsible thing to do, provided you also do the stuff which is campaigning.
Yeah, yeah. So let's talk a little bit about Blue Planet 2, because you talked about the last few years and that catalyst, and now people are really focused in on it. And for me, I know certainly the correspondence that we've had with the One Show, a lot about plastics, a lot about the younger generation not wanting to put plastics into the system. And it came from Blue Planet 2, which, to be fair, wasn't a whole program about plastics. It was actually a very small portion of the program. 2 minutes. So how much did that take you by surprise then, with it, the reaction to that? Or did you expect it when that was broadcast?
No, because I've been talking about plastic and being a horrible business for a long time.
For some reason, as you said before, people weren't getting the message, but
No,
they did from that program.
And one doesn't know what it is that makes the bell ring in that kind of way. I mean, we were walking along a beach, and I came across lots of a tropical beach and lots of plastic, and we said, look, let's say something about this, which is what we did. And it wasn't carefully plotted. It was just, there it was, and let's say something about it, and we did. And no one was more surprised that it had as great an impact as it did. Why that was, perhaps it was because the audience didn't think it was coming. Perhaps it wasn't heralded all the way along beforehand that this is what we're going to talk about. So it caught them unawares. Because there have been plenty of other people talking about plastic long before, Blue Planet. Yeah. But somehow it just hit that mood and had the consequences it has.
So what were the conversations then in the Natural History Unit after that went out, from a producer's perspective as well, about putting more content out there so that you could act fast while everybody was focused in on this?
Well, we saw what we could do. And to the BBC Natural History Unit's credit, they've never let they've not put that baton down, as you might say. I mean, they've been running with it ever since.
And on the grand scale, I mean, everybody here tonight, there's a lot of big business people here, there's people at school, everybody wants to do their very best for the planet. So where do you find in your own life is the best place to start with this in making changes?
Well, I am tempted to say, and have said, in our own private lives, we have to change. We are extraordinarily extravagant. We are fantastically wealthy, judged in a global context. We have everything, and we've used it in a gratuitously careless way. We have taken, and not given. And if you ask me what you need to do in your own private life, it is not waste. We are fantastically privileged in this country. We're living high on the hog. We are having everything that we want. And we are taking it, and in many instances, just discarding it. We must learn not to be so greedy, not to waste things, not to waste light, not to waste power, not to waste food, not to waste space, and not to waste time just right now.
So these are actually easy things that we can do. Yeah, if you... Do you think that drive comes from us not wasting? Do you think it's about business? Do you think it's about politics? Do you think we as the people have the power to take this into our own hands?
Well, I jolly well hope we have, because there's the problem. And if we just say, well, we don't have the power to do anything about it, and hell take the hindmost, we can't say that. Of course we have the power. We created this. We created civilization. We created we created the mess.
Yeah.
We can clear it up. But we need to be firm in what we're doing and convinced that it's the right thing. Almost not because it would make our life easier or more difficult, but because it's right. We are part of the natural world. We depend upon the natural world for every breath of air we breathe, every mouthful of food that we eat. But more than that, we owe it to the rest of the world. We are not the only species on this world. We are in the whole universe, as far as we can see. There is life only in this one planet, and life of indescribable splendor and beauty, and life to which we are related. We are part of it. I don't want to go to the moon or Mars. There is no life there. The planet is rich with life in all its diversity and beauty. Every single one of us depends upon it, not simply just for what we eat or what we breathe, but spiritually, morally. We belong to the natural world, and it's in our care. We are a part of it. We must care for it. And because we're so clever that we have now got dominion over every part of it, means that not we should use that power, but we should cherish that power and make sure that it's used for the good of everything that lives on this planet.
What do you say to those people who say that, you know, climate change is going to happen anyway? What is your answer to those people?
I think the answer is that if climate change proceeds along the way that it is doing at the moment, the world is going to lose its fertility. The seas will become more and more sterile. That the systems of weather and ocean currents, which we have used in order to sustain ourselves, is going to be disruptive. That there will be mass starvation in some areas. There will be mass migration in other areas. And that humanity will be facing a very black future. I don't think that is out of the question. It is perfectly possible that could happen. But it is also the case that we know enough about the workings of the world to prevent it from happening. We have the knowledge. Surely we should have the determination to do something about it.
Well, interestingly, just thinking now, I mean, you were saying about how the BBC started with the finest television and it went off across the world, and lots of television companies have taken suit. Bizarrely, it was Britain that started the Industrial Revolution. Look at what's happened since. So if those big businesses that are here are setting the finest examples in the world, then surely those examples show that the rest of the world could follow suit from those fantastic people here that want to make changes in their businesses and set the road off in the right direction.
And that is going to happen in this country, in Glasgow, at the end of this year. There's an opportunity with COP26 that nations from all over the world should be presented with the stark truth of what the future could hold for us. And the ability not just to say, yes, we all agree and we will take steps sometime. It has to be done now. And every day we delay it, the more difficult it becomes. So COP26 could be a turning point for the whole world. And it'll be here in this country, in Scotland. And so the UK has a huge responsibility to try and put everything in our power to bring about an agreement among nations, amongst Brazil, about the United States, who at the moment don't buy this. But
do you have hope that they will? Do you have hope that
the processes of international bargaining and negotiations is something I don't know about. I do know that 5 years ago in Paris, where I was also the COP25, and I came out of that meeting, or that group of meetings, with the British chief scientist, Sir David King. And he had given his life to this. And he had every fiber in his body in this. And he came out and he was walking on air and he said, we've done it, we've done it. And we had done it. But that was agreeing what should be done. But then comes the crucial thing, how do we pay for it? That's what's going to happen in Glasgow in the end of this year.
And are you going back to that meeting?
I should be do what I can to help. There's much more important and more powerful people than me. Yeah. But there will. I mean, obviously, I'll do whatever I can and whatever I'm wanted to do.
And what do you really honestly hope is realistic to come out of that?
That the countries would commit to proper targets and to pay for it. To pay for it. It needs to be paid for. The bill will be huge, but it's tiny compared with the damage of what it would cost if we don't do the acts which we have to do now.
Yeah, and so that's the way that you put the argument forward, is it? Behind, we don't know what goes on behind those closed doors, but is that what you do? You sit there, you say, this is the forecast, this is what's going to happen?
I'm not in that cutting edge either, because there are governments, that are talking. And I'm not an elected representative of anybody, but this country has the banner. It has the baton in its hand to lead, and it must.
If I can, I want to bring up Brian Cox. Are you there, Brian? Yes, Brian. I know that you wanted to come up and sit with us and join the conversation if you like. So let's welcome Brian Cox, one of your finest actors here.
It seems to me that from that moment that you cracked that rock and you looked at something, that you hit upon something very simple, which is truth and truisms. And it seems to me that you've, I don't know, possibly with difficulty, positively, effortlessly, but you've lived with these truisms your entire life. And it's so inspiring to hear you talk the way you talk. And I feel humbled by it. I really genuinely, I think probably everybody in this room feels the same. Because it's just, there's no getting round it. You can't get round any of it because it's just simple truths. And these simple truths, out of these simple truths, great changes will come. But the trouble is, we have such bad habits that we forget about those simple truths. And it seems to me that you have been blessed or whatever, but you've had this in your entire life. Your whole life has been, I'm sure you've had your ups and downs, but your whole life has been based on these notions, these truisms, these truths. And they just ring huge bells for everybody. And thank God you're here.
Sir David, thank you so much.